Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads with my co-host and partner, Mr. Shawn Francis. I am Brian Altunian. And today our conversation is about access to resources, and amazing how there's a difference in access to resources depending on a whole bunch of factors, including your culture, your background, sometimes the color of your skin, and just your overall general experience. Today we have with us an amazing guest who's doing research and study in this exact area. So stay tuned because this is going to be a fascinating conversation. I promise you. Another episode of Just Two Dads. Hey, everybody. I am Brian Altunian, along with Shawn Francis. Another episode of Just Two Dads. We started this about now almost 4 years ago, and as a conversation of just two dads dealing with special needs issues, and wanted to talk about the amazing people that we find that are serving our community, people that we in our travels had no idea even we're dealing with issues that we didn't even know existed in some cases, and we thought this would be a great opportunity for us to create a platform and shine the light on those folks who are doing amazing work in our community, and today is going to be no exception. So we're going to get into it. Before we launch this episode with our guest Cherisse Watts, I just want to thank everybody who's catching us. If you're on Facebook, please respond, hit us with comments, let us know if you've got anything you want to say, or if you've got a question for our guest. If you're catching us after the fact on our YouTube channel, or more importantly on our website, which we've recently launched at justtodadspodcast.com. Hit the like and the subscribe button on the videos, and lets us get out to a larger audience. And if you're catching us on WSTX AM radio down in the U.S. Virgin Islands, or on any Google or any podcast outlets, including Google, thank you for making us part of your listening day. Thank you to Billy Footwear for always being a big fan of our podcast. And so, without further ado, just to thank everybody. John Hall, thank everybody who's participating in helping us keep this platform alive. And without further ado, I'm going to throw it over to Shawn Francis to introduce our guest. And before we do that, how you doing, Shawn? You good?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to today's show because, when we started this this adventure known as Just Two Dads, this podcast, we started, thinking two things. We're going to shine a light on people that serve the community, the service of special needs community, and also maybe give men or dads a voice to express themselves in a way that they usually don't. But the truth of the matter is, the show is really about exposing our humanity more so than anything else, and letting us know how much we have in common. And complete transparency. I'm going to introduce our guest and then the topic of today's show. And the topic is essentially, do our children that are indigenous or children of color, are they slower to get diagnosis? Is systemic racism in the flow or in the way of getting access to services and things of that nature? Off the top of one's head, they've got one of two answers. They're saying, no. This country's advanced too much for there to even be racism. There's that delusion. And then there's other people that are like, of course it is. There's racism any and everywhere. And then there's people in between that just might not have that experience and might not know. And our guest today is someone who, based on her own personal experience, is trying to not just right or wrong, but expose it and answer that question as well, based on her work, her history, and a study that she's got going on right now at UCLA. And that is none other than Cherisse Watts. Cherisse, welcome to Just Two Dads.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both for having me on. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
And did I introduce you correctly? Should I have said doctor yet?
No, not yet. Not yet. I am working towards that. Yes, I'm a PhD candidate, so almost there.
Okay, good. So,
just
go ahead.
From UCLA. I just want to throw that out there.
Yes,
so,
yeah. UCLA.
Hello, Bruin. There you go.
Just had to,
Go Bruins.
Shout out. There we go. All right. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Cherisse and I got connected because I heard of this study that she was doing, and I became very curious about the study itself because I'll come right out and tell you, I run the risk of quote unquote losing my black card because I've experienced racism as has any black American, but when it comes to our son Elijah's diagnosis, um, the caregiving experience, um, treatment, and everything that he's received over the years, he was diagnosed at 3, he's now 18. I cannot think of one instance where race came in to play. But I am not naive enough to know that it didn't. Maybe I just didn't realize it. Nor am I naive enough to know that it's not, or to think that it's not out there. We've been very blessed in a variety of ways, but you never lose sight of that. And the whole thing with this topic and the study is about finding out. And let me be really transparent. Brian and I had a conversation prior to the show where Brian was doubtful about what kind of value can I add if I haven't had that experience. I don't know. And I said, well, your questions have value because Brian as a person, one of the reasons I love him as a person is because he's authentic, and he's like, some of my questions might make me seem insensitive. I don't want that to be the case. Well, Brian and I have had situations, Brian being of Jewish faith, I've had questions about anti-Semitism and that experience, which I know nothing of, that I was concerned might make me appear insensitive. And what happens is I've often talked about when my wife and I first started dating, my wife being Mexican American and meeting her sister's son for the first time. And he says, Shawn, your hair is like paper. Wow. Like it was just a really, far out thing to him. And I thought that kind of innocence is what we need to hold on to. And what happens as we get older is like, we get afraid to ask the questions. We get afraid to be curious. So before we launch into the study itself, tell us a little bit about you and how you arrived at this kind of work, because I think that is just as, if not more fascinating than anything else.
Okay. Yeah, I can start with that. So I'll start from the very beginning. So I was born in Inglewood, California, to parents who emigrated from the Caribbean island of Trinidad.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wait. Here's what's bizarre with our conversation too. Not only did I not know that, I never heard anything in you until you just said Trinidad, because you didn't say parents that immigrated from Trinidad. You didn't say Trinidad. You said Trinidad. It's two different things. Or I should say two different things. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, you get it.
Yes.
Yes. So I have two brothers, one who is 13 years older and one who is 2.5 years younger. And so I'm the middle child and the only girl. And our younger brother was diagnosed with Down syndrome. So from a very early age, I kind of took it upon myself to have a very nurturing role. Even though I was very young when my mom was pregnant with him, I actually have memories of myself talking and singing to her pregnant tummy. And really just I became his advocate growing up. He had a speech impediment. So, it was difficult for people to understand him in his early years. And somehow I was the one who could pretty much make out anything that he was saying. And I had that understanding. So I really was the one to try and help everyone understand what he was trying to communicate. When I learned to read, I would, sit there and read to him. And my mom was working on teaching him to read. I was right there with her doing all that I could to help. My mom taught both of us. We were homeschooled. I was homeschooled through 8th grade, and she continued with him throughout. And so, just seeing her work with him was very inspirational to me, and her patience and how she, was with him overall was really inspirational. And I think that kind of planted a seed.
Yeah.
And so I had this little tape recorder that I would record a show. I guess you could call it a podcast that I had back in the day. I would perform, and I would give him the microphone to say certain words and repeat after me. And, he would do everything that I was doing. So kind of thinking back, I think that really helped his speech development.
Had to.
Time. Yeah,
yes.
For sure. And so, I also had a little Fisher's Price doctor's kit. And it was like one of my favorite toys. So I think just having that experience with my brother, um, doing the most that I could with my little self to help him, seeing how my family cared for him, going to his doctor's appointments. I think all of that led to my interest in the healthcare field.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, all through high school, all through college, I wanted to be a pediatrician. And so I was very driven to achieve, in the math and sciences, as you have to have, top science grades to get into med school. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so when I went away to college in Massachusetts, and the school that I went to, which was Wellesley, they
Mm.
have a very
Love it.
rigorous science program.
Right.
Yes. And so, I was a top, student in high school, but once I got there, it was a slightly, slightly different story. I encountered pre-med counselors who were very discouraging, like, oh, are you sure this is what you want to do with your life? Your grades aren't your science grades aren't the best. Maybe rethink your career choice. There were a
Wow.
lot of Black students at the school who were told that, and so that was very discouraging. But because I had family who was extremely supportive, they were like, no, you'll get there. Just keep pushing, doing your best. We'll find a way. You'll get there. So once I graduated, I double majored in neuroscience and Spanish. So that was also a very difficult, a very difficult
Mm-hmm.
major to have. So after graduation, I continued to work on improving my science GPA. But then I had this internship that kind of changed things for me. Excuse
Wow.
the ambulance in the background.
Okay.
Um, I truly got to observe nurses and learn more about their role and how they are with patients. And just kind of thinking about it, I was like, they spend more time with patients. They're very knowledgeable. A lot of times they're the ones counseling doctors on, like, plans and what they think would be right for that patient because they spend the time, so much time with them. I'm like, wow, I kind of feel more connected to this line of work. So at that point, I was like, okay, let's pivot. Let's go ahead and do nursing prerequisites so I can get into a nursing program.
Mm-hmm.
And so the nice thing with nursing is that there are programs out there where you can do like a career change entry level master's program, and I found one of those, and I'm like, okay, let's do it. So I applied to nursing school, and it's during my time in nursing school that I actually learned more about like nursing research, and that there are opportunities to become a nurse scientist and get your PhD. I had no idea about that prior to entering nursing school. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was during that time, I had a mentor who went through what they call a bridge program through that school I was at to UCLA, where they mentor you in just the process of developing a research idea and
Mm-hmm.
applying to the PhD program at UCLA.
Oh, interesting.
And so, yeah, that's kind of what got the ball rolling with the topic that I'm doing now. So, I
Do you
went
care to
direct.
give the mentor a shout out? Sorry.
Yeah, shout out to Dr. Janet Mentes and Dr. Sharon Kopp. They were amazing in helping prepare me to go from entry level masters into directly my PhD program. So I'm very thankful to
Fantastic.
them. Yes.
Great. Great. Great.
Yeah. So it was during that time that they really helped me kind of think about research topics. And so I told them, I know that within the Black community, a lot of times disability can be a stigma. Like, we don't often talk about it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's getting better, but I think it can still raise its ugly head. So I'm like, okay, I don't know if families are really gaining access to the resources that they should, because I know growing up, my parents, they had no idea about all the different resources that could have helped them
Yeah.
a lot with my brother, like the regional center, like speech therapy, occupational therapy.
Exactly.
They
Right.
didn't know about those things. They just took it upon themselves and did the best that they could. So
Yeah.
just knowing that, and then getting into the literature and seeing, yes, there is a disparity where Black and Latinx children are not getting the screening and the early diagnosis at the same age compared to their white peers.
Counterparts.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, there's something going on there.
I wanted to touch on two things. One, I was going to talk about this is how important it is to have these conversations and to get outside of the evils of what, you know, when one thinks of the evils or the ills of racism, they
Hmm.
think about how one group is oppressed by another. But what is talked about to some extent, and this is some of it is fact, some of it is my theory,
Hmm.
is the evils that one group can do to itself. Because I have to think that the stigma with regard to special needs that exists, or disabilities that exists in multiple communities of color or within any minority,
Hmm.
I don't know what the answer is, but I'd be curious to find out what effect it has on the psyche of a group that decides, well, I need to excel at any rate, I need to be seen as equal, I need to do, anything that
Right.
affects your own, it affects your self-image. So
Yes.
when we put people in these boxes based on race, gender, or whatever have you, the level of poison that exists from it is very insidious, and it trickles all the way down. And I have to think that that plays a role in the way we see ourselves, and that's why you see people that are minorities from other cultures, anything other than white America,
Hmm.
tends to, there's so much work to be done as a result of that. So let's get into
That's very true.
the disparity itself, because as I mentioned earlier, we haven't had any experience as a family that I can point my finger to
Hmm.
with regard to diagnosis and treatment that is based on race. But that I'm not stupid enough to believe that to say that it's not out there, because I know that it is. I've had experiences, with racism, but not with regard to that. Talk to us about the disparities, and where they come from and what they might be.
Absolutely. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on the point that you were making about, I think what you were talking about is that intersectionality piece. And like, you have multiple identities. So we're talking about children who are Black, children who have a disability. Sometimes they're female. Sometimes, all of that you have to kind of take into consideration. And so a lot of the parents that I'm kind of speaking with, I think they have a lot of them have a heavy fear about how society will view their child and how they will treat
Mm,
their child. And so they have this um, kind of desire to make sure that their child is as independent as they possibly can be. I
mm,
want them to be able to live on their own. I want them to be able to take care of themselves. I want them to be able to communicate and let people know what they need, how they're feeling, because otherwise there's this real fear of like what can happen if they're misunderstood. And we've seen so many instances, unfortunately, where children with disabilities or young adults with disabilities maybe encountered the police, and the
Yeah.
police may not have known they had an autism diagnosis,
Yeah.
and
mm-hmm.
it went downhill from there. So
Yeah.
Right,
it's
right.
definitely something that we have to take into consideration, that intersectionality, and as you said, how it affects the psyche of parents and families. um, But going back to, the systemic racism piece of it, what I'm learning so many different things from families. They don't really have a definitive answer. Well, yes, this is systemic racism, or yes, it's due to socioeconomic status. It can vary. It can be multiple factors. I
Mm-hmm.
had one parent talk to me about an instance where she had a concern about her child. His head was actually getting bigger. And
Mm.
she's like, I'm noticing that his head is growing. I'm really scared. He's having these seizures. I don't know what's happening. I mean, really like major concerns. And this was during the height of the pandemic, and she took him into a clinic. And the only thing that the pediatrician was concerned about is that the child was not vaccinated. He was, I think, 9 or 10 months at the time. She's like, I'm not going to see this child. He's not vaccinated. That's all that pediatrician was focusing on, nothing else. So she wasn't heard at all during that time. because she herself made the decision to have her children vaccinated once they reach 1 year. So that was her personal decision that she made. So
Right.
just building on that, she said that was like her kind of introduction to really needing to step up her advocacy game and, kind of put a pedal to the metal in terms of how can I get the help that I need from my child. So that was kind of hard to hear. There were other examples of, there was this one mom who said that her child had a very rare condition, and doctors would come in, barely even speak to her or acknowledge her presence, come in and, like look at the child. And they were so fascinated and bringing other people into the room, not even addressing her, and then coming up to her and saying, "Oh, can we take pictures? I would really, really like to, show your case to my med school class." So a lot of times, parents felt really dismissed. They felt not heard. And, it's just different things like that have been coming up where, really you're kind of seeing the humanity of the family is not being acknowledged.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I would say though, our experience was very similar, and it was, slightly different. In that when we went in to have my daughter checked by a neurologist, she barely acknowledged us as well. And in fact, she, spoke to my daughter for about 2 minutes in front of us, and then went around to the, desk and just started typing and just started like blurting out her diagnosis, out loud as if we weren't even there.
Right.
And, and then, I literally had to tell her, like, time out. What are you talking? What does all this mean? And her response was, she's got developmental delays, and it's going to come out like this. And these are all the things that she's not going to do. And her bedside manner was horrible. I mean, in essence, to me, what you're saying in this part of our conversation is there's a lack of compassion when it comes to dealing with people in our community, especially a tremendous lack of passion. And it's very difficult to find somebody who actually cares enough. But to not see a child because the child's not vaccinated. In that particular case, that's their rule. But
Right.
But the insensitivity, I think, has been going on. And by the way, that was 27 years ago, and we had no idea. The other thing is access to information. We had no idea we had no idea what the diagnosis even meant.
Right.
Not only that, but the neurologist didn't even tell us this is where you need to go and this is what you need to do to get answers. And I think in general in our community, there's just a lack of, first of all, lack of compassion. Second of all,
Yes.
not knowing where the resources are and how to get access to these resources. We went online again 28 years ago, when I think I talked about it. Like, we went online via Prodigy, and just to do some, because that was back in the day. We're talking a long time ago. We went online to find out, like, what does microcephaly mean, and what does that mean exactly, and had to find a support group online that told us about regional center and early intervention and all this other stuff, because access to those kinds of resources was just not around back then. And so,
right.
And the other thing I'll say is that men, we all have a fix-it mentality. So we all want to fix the problem, A, or B, we want to pretend it doesn't exist, or it messes with our own psyche, in that how could I have produced a child with any kind of defect when I'm a perfect specimen of a human being? You know what I mean? It's sort of like we have all these other issues. So that there's consistency there among I think all folks who have children who are diagnosed with some sort of disability. How did this happen? How can I fix it? What do I need to do? And what does that mean for my child? Is my child going to live alone and be a productive member of society? And then decision, right? And so I find it fascinating. And I think that what you're talking about, and I want to hear more about the study, because I think you're right. I think generally in this country, unless you know, you don't know. And if your community is not one that shares a lot of information or that stuff is talked about, you're even more reticent to even say, I need some help, right? I don't know where to go or what to do with all of this.
Yeah.
And so, I do find it fascinating because it's not inherent in the system to reach out and say, if you have a problem, we're here to help. And so you've got to say, I have a problem. Where do I go to help? Those are two different things, right? And I think
Yes,
across the board, the thing that's missing is just sort of a common understanding that there are resources out there, but the offering of the resource and the receiving of the resource, there's a huge gap in between,
huge.
right?
Yep.
Absolutely,
And
yes.
it really is up to us as a community to make sure that we can bridge that gap as much as possible. So I love the fact that you're doing this study. I told Shawn I'm not going to be able to contribute to this conversation because my family hasn't experienced this concept of racism. But I will say this: like, I feel the commonality. I get it. I feel the allyship, if you will. I feel the issue of access to information and resource and help. And, love the fact that you're doing this study, and I can't wait to see how it results. So that was just my long-winded commentary, but.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing. It's really unfortunate that parents have to push as hard as they do. There were families who shared, I'm actively seeing, my child, like this is autism specific, standing on his toes, spinning, something that they call stimming, where they have certain things that they have sensory needs. They're seeing these things happen, and they're actually going into the pediatrician and saying, this is what I'm seeing. I have some concerns. This looks like this. What should I do? And so many parents have felt a disappointment when they think that they're gonna, get the help that they need, where doctors will say, but your child's healthy. They're okay physically. Don't worry about it. Give it time. And it's like, well, if you're seeing this happen now, why are we giving it time? What is it to giving it time if you are actively seeing signs? What is the harm in recommending or suggesting they start early intervention services when we know that there are so many benefits to starting it as early as possible? So I'm kind of trying to get to the bottom of why there are these differences happening with some families, really.
Yeah, I think you've answered one of my questions already, which is you're trying to get to the bottom of that. Why is that? To which I'll add, I think, again, there's not people we need to just get and stay curious. There isn't enough of that. And I also think that when someone goes to an institution and spends time, money, blood, sweat, and tears and effort to get a degree and be put in a position to enter a profession that they are hopefully passionate about, depending on that person's personality, they may be less curious because they now, quote unquote, know so much. So, they're quick to come in and here's what you got. This is what you do. And then that's the end of that. And then their ability to see and hear people becomes lessened or challenged when, ironically, their own desire to be seen and heard is just as great as it ever was, maybe even greater as a result, because now they want to make sure that they're, attached to that title or whatever the case might be. But at the end of the day, it just means that we need to do that. The other thing is to remember that no matter what kind of title somebody has, at the end of the day, a doctor's a doctor, a lawyer's a lawyer, but they're all people. You still need to make sure that you advocate for your own child. And if there's anything that's missing there in terms of energy, being seen, being heard, whether it's a therapist, a social worker, or whoever, you can fire them. And should do so. That doesn't mean you need to be a prima donna, but you also don't need to be a doormat and have everlasting across your name.
And it's really trying to get families to see that, because I don't know, within our community, you see, the doctor and you're like, well, they're this authority, they're up here, there's this big power differential, and they don't feel like they have the right to say, well, no, I want this, or no, this therapist is not doing what exactly I would like them to do. I'm not satisfied with what's happening. Really getting them to see that they have the right to speak up and advocate. I think that's part of it too.
I agree. We talk to parents who feel completely marginalized, even when it comes to IEPs and setting up an educational program for their child, where they feel like, well, this is what the district and the teachers and the administrators told us, so we just did what they said that we could do, not realizing they could be an advocate to go, no, I want my child to do this, this, this.
Right.
And it is interesting because I think that there is it's almost like a general malaise when it comes to these authority figures or just, whether it's education or medicine, where, it's just top down and they just, this is the way it is. And most folks just take it and they don't understand what it means to be really, truly an advocate for their child. Because to your point, and I think this is where there's cultural differences, right? In different cultures, you didn't do that. You didn't argue with the lawyer or the administrator or the doctor. Like they're the expert, and so okay, I'll just go with all of that. Yeah.
I was going to say when they first came about with the concept of self-determination, I really struggled with it because I was like, shouldn't I be doing that anyway? If somebody's not doing their job to care for my kid, like, you're out, I'm going to find somebody that. So I was like, why do they need to pass some law or some term that now says you can have someone that works in your best interest when you should have been doing that all along? Now, of course, there's more to it with regard to health insurance and, all that kind of stuff. So I'm more familiar with the nuance now. But again, especially from a cultural standpoint, the whole thought is that, this is that person knows. They're the doctor, they're the lawyer, they're the so-and-so. So Cherisse, tell us, what is the study what does it look like? How can someone take part in it if they want to? What can they expect in terms of what they will give and in terms of what they would receive as well? And where can that be done?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So basically the eligibility criteria, I'm looking to speak with Black parents of children ages 0 to 5 who have a developmental delay or developmental disability. It doesn't specifically have to be autism. Also looking to speak with families of children with Down syndrome. Just wanting to learn from them what their experience has been, the barriers as well as the facilitators. I want to hear what problems are there and what's helping, like what works. Because there are families, like Shawn said, who don't have bad experiences. They've had all good experiences. So I want to hear, like, what is it that worked for you so that we can probably try and make sure that this is implemented for all families. So basically it's this to start, they would contact me. We would go through a screening process. And there's my contact information on the screen. You can either call or email. The screening process basically takes 5 minutes. I basically check in. Do you consider yourself, to identify as a Black person? Do you have a child 0 to 5 that has a developmental delay disability? Also, I'm only looking to speak with parents who reside in California right now. So they have to reside in California and also have the ability to either join me on Zoom or on FaceTime. And so once we get that cleared and they are considered to be eligible for the study, during that conversation, we'll do like a demographic survey. And then I'll go over the research information sheet so that they can learn a little bit more about the study and what I'm looking to learn from them. So overall, that first initial conversation takes about 20 minutes. And then for the interview, it's 45 minutes to an hour. And for their time, I do offer a $100 Amazon gift card. And so I very much value parents' time and the information that they are sharing with me, because really they're the experts and they're the ones who know exactly what their experience has been and what could be improved within the healthcare system, within early intervention. So that's what I'm looking to learn from them so that I can hopefully one day work towards some type of intervention that helps improve outcomes.
Good.
I have two
good.
things. Two things.
Just
to say.
give I was just going to say, for those that are watching, and or listening, I should say, on platforms where they're not on YouTube or looking at us live, that phone number is area code 310-869-5284. That's 310-869-5284. And then the email address is C Watts. So that's C as in cat, W as in water, ATTS as in Sam, the number 22 at g.ucla.edu. And you'll also find that on the show notes. Go ahead, Brian.
Beautiful. Cherisse, I was going to say two things. One is, in California, the access to resources is better than a lot of other states. And to me, I think it would be fascinating to see, the expansion of the study going also to some other state where the access to resources just in general is not as good, and see, the experience. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the second thing, which is I find fascinating, and of course I have sort of an entrepreneurial perspective on a lot of things, and my wheels are spinning. And we have lawyers who are IEP advocates who will go into the IEP and fight for parents, and they know the law, they know the rule, they know everything that a parent has a right to have access to, and they fight. Man, wouldn't it be amazing to have medical advocates as well that you could hire that go, hey, listen, you should be looking at this type of thing. You could create an entire sub-industry here of people who can help every community, but especially those communities that have the stigma or don't have access or don't know to have access, goes out and helps the community understand how to navigate these waters. That would be
absolutely even better if it's like a peer advocate, like parents who have been through that process, Black parents who've been through that process. These are the pitfalls. This is what you should avoid. This is what you should request. Absolutely. That's such a great idea.
Yeah. So any parents out there who are listening, we need help.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah, I find this fascinating. Now, let me ask you this. Is there and obviously every study has to have certain parameters. So you've got, 0 to 5. Is there any reason why that particular age group of child, or? Yeah.
Yes, I chose 0 to 5 because I want to hear from the parents who did hopefully get the access, that early intervention access, because 0 to 5 is such a critical age where early intervention is really best, because the brain is developing, and studies show that starting early intervention at such an age has the most benefit. So I really wanted to check in with the families who have had the fortune of getting their children either screened or checked for delay, or actually obtain a diagnosis, and finding out from them what were the difficulties and what worked, so that we can get more families in at that particular age.
Sure. And obviously it makes sense. And at the same time, and now I'm going to poke a hole, which I don't do, but my daughter had early intervention, and that was 28 years ago. And I'm thankful for that. And again, to me, the age difference is what was available 28 years ago versus what's been available in the last 5 years. I find that to be interesting, because 0 to 5, because really any parent who's got a child who was in early intervention between those ages of 0 to 5 could give you great information and great feedback. But I do understand, you got to put some parameters on it.
Yes.
But anyways, I find that fascinating. Okay, cool. Good to know. So people 0 to 5, and again, we're going to put up on the screen again, but people can reach out to you and screen to see if they qualify for the interview, and then the interview takes 45 minutes, and it's compensated. So it's worth people's time. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, there's two things you're thinking about. Yes, so let's be honest. Some people are hearing this going, "Wait a minute, $100 Amazon gift card, sign me up." That's great, but the other thing is, you can also be part of the answer to the question, well, is there systemic racism really? Exactly. Well, and then why? And then how do we create a solution for that? You have the ability to, in some way, great or small, be of some benefit to people that aren't yet even born yet.
Yes.
And that's far greater than an Amazon gift card, as cool as that might be.
That's a great point, Shawn. Yes, absolutely.
100%. Shawn,
Yes,
words of wisdom, Shawn Francis, everybody. That's beautiful.
Yeah, just trying to make a difference, man. Little things go such a long way.
Well, listen, oftentimes if we don't have access to it, how many times we've thought, oh man, in fact, this is how this whole podcast started. Shawn, man, I wish I had known about this when my child was was age appropriate, right? So the best thing that we can do, in fact, this is how Shawn and I think in general, the best thing that we can do is, we didn't know about it, but we want other people to know about it, because the impact it could, we had to fight our way through it and figure it out on our own.
Right.
We would have gotten that destination much faster had we known about this resource. So I love the fact that, that yes, turn around and lift a hand to people,
Yes.
And hey, I always find a reason to bring these words in, because they're so poignant and they're so in my blood. And I wish I could have met him before he passed away to explain it to him. But in the words of the great Muhammad Ali, service to others is the rent we pay for our room on earth. And the thing is, a lot of people think that service needs to mean that you're behind a counter, lifting a heavy object or item, or you have a shovel or a sledgehammer in your hand, and whatever. Those things are fine. And you can also be of service by being elected to office, whatever. There's the big scale, but then there's the small scale. If you have an experience someplace that somebody can benefit from, especially if they don't know about it, you have a spiritual, humane obligation to at least tell them. And as human beings, we just tend to forget that so often. It doesn't matter. A little thing goes a long way.
It does. That's such a great point.
And I know, Cherisse, you had personal experience with your brother, but Shawn and I are always hold people up as heroes who contribute to our community without having a personal connection, like without having a child, and yet provide support for children, for families, with children with some sort of, special needs issue. And so, we are huge fans of folks who are trying to improve the community as a whole and making a difference in their lives. And again, I know you had it as with your sibling, but for us, you are definitely doing heroic work here, because it's going to have an impact for so many people.
Thank you. That
really
means a
is
lot.
Yeah.
So how long does the study take? When did you start the study? How long will it be taking place?
So the study started, I would say, around September of last year. There have been some, it's been difficult. Recruitment has been difficult, I would say.
Really?
Yeah, it's interesting. It has been hard. Just because, you reach out to the regional centers, not all of them are willing to share, different rules in place and whatnot. So not all of them are willing to share the flyer. You go to different organizations and they're like, well, no, we can't share this here. So it's hard to kind of reach the community, because I myself, due to IRB, like the Institutional Review Board, I can't go up to parents and say, oh, participate in my study, or like talk to them and like hand out the flyer. I have to go through an organization, or colleagues of mine have to share it on my behalf. Yeah. So, it just actually picked up, I would say, over the last 3 months.
Okay.
So I'm up to 15 participants at the moment, and I think the goal is around 25. So I'm getting there. The goal really for me, I would love to be finished with interviewing by the end of summer, so that I can, get to working on the results and the discussion, and be done with the dissertation by the end of the year. That's the kind of goal I have for myself. But
Okay, good. Several things. Yeah, so this is something that we're going to make sure we get out to people, and this is going to sound really revolutionary for anybody that's listening and worried about whether it's legal pushback or whatever have you. I know as much about the study as you do. I know as much about the type of energy that Cherisse gives as you might get from this here today. So therefore, we want to make sure that we're always trying to shine a light and let people know and be answers to problems and things of that sort. So we're simply going to let people know this study is taking place. Here's how you can find out. Go through the interview process and make a decision for yourself as to whether or not you want to be a part of something like that. If it doesn't feel right and you don't want to be a part of it, back off. Don't even do it. But if you don't find out, then you won't know. But if you like what you see and it makes sense, there's the $100 gift card, and the greater value in that you're helping to be an answer to a question that will be asked by people not yet even born. And then the other thing you're helping to do is overcome some kind of little bit of cultural bias. For instance, we have a men's group called The Den. It is a support group for caregivers or fathers of those with special needs. One of the guys in the group, I purposely don't tag him on any of the things that we promote about the group on social media because he and his wife have not yet told their family about their son's diagnosis. And in no uncertain terms, there's cultural things that reasons for that. And that's not to judge anyone, but I would be willing to bet that a lot of the people that, well, a certain percentage of the people that may not respond to you are about, again, I don't know if I need to, are we going to go public with my child's diagnosis? How many people are going to know? How are they going to treat him? What is that going to mean? So
yeah,
those are important things to work a way around. And I'm not knocking anyone for their reasons. I'm just saying that it's worthwhile to explore why you might not want somebody to know, why you might not be open sharing it. And just make sure that it's not getting in the way of other things.
And it's absolutely something we can talk more about in the interview. Something that you can explore with me, certain things that might come up, certain things that you've experienced in your past, how it's influenced your thought process now, and how your perspectives are based on your environment and your upbringing, how that influences how you think about disability. All of those things are topics that we can explore further in the interview. And also, just so everybody knows, and this is something I go over during the screening process, no names are used. Everything is
That was my
anonymous.
next question, the level of
Yes.
confidentiality. Yes.
Yes.
All anonymous.
So absolutely, everything is anonymous. Once the manuscript is published, nothing identifying about you will be there. So everything will be confidential.
That's a good way to go. That's
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's amazing. It's a conversation that should happen, and it seems like a base of 25 doesn't seem like a very large user,
Sample size. Yeah.
sample size. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
As a psych major, you'd think that I had to know sample size of tests. But psych at UCLA, so whatever that means. Anyways, but I was going to say, this is something I think that is going to yield very specific and definitive results. I just believe. I mean, just from being in the community, in general, I feel like there is definitely a lack of, again, that connection between needing the support and help and guidance and providing it. I think there's a big, and I think in those communities for sure, because I know it exists in general, but I know for those communities there's difference.
And here's what it comes down to. We always say that, like I'll make a post about something that hits me a certain way, and I may end it in saying that anything that affects the general population affects the special needs community or affects those that are caregivers or parents to someone with a disability 10 times more. Well, the truth of the matter is any and everything that affects the general population affects any kind of minority 10 to 50 times more. So whether you're a woman, a person of color, a person with a disability or diagnosis, one who's a caregiver or parent to someone with a disability or diagnosis, or all of those things, all of the above. So what happens is, if your doctor is walking into a room and he's dismissive to someone, regardless of color, we have to remember, again, racism and just the isms and schisms and everything that we see in the boxes that we put people into, it's very, very, very insidious, and it's rooted into our being. We have a predisposed thought of people. Put it this way, I don't care how pure you are or try to be, there's no way that you see a person approaching you as open as you are to receive who and what they are. I don't care who you are. You have a preconceived notion about something about them based on their gender, based on their race, based on what they're wearing. It's just part of the human condition. And if that is the case, and it is, then it only makes sense that there would be these biases that don't serve when it comes to caring for children or people of color. And we need to accept that and remain curious and have the conversation. as human beings and as a nation altogether, because there are people that are going to hear the idea of a study like that and be like, what? Again, something else, and just be turned off.
Yeah.
And that's why it goes back to the power of a question. Questions are more powerful than statements. And we learn so much by asking them too. Speaking of which, this hour has just flown by, and this is the portion of the show where we ask the following question with context. Our ability to change the world, no matter how great or small, is tied to our ability or our willingness to change ourselves. With that said, Cherisse, give us one example, just one, of a thought or belief that you once felt to be, you once believed really strongly, but no longer believed to be true.
That's a really good question. I would say one belief I once held that I no longer believe to be true is that all you need is hard work and dedication to achieve anything you've set your mind to. I think my parents raised me with that mindset. You have to have perseverance, determination, remain steadfast in all you do, and you'll succeed. And I'm deeply appreciative of those lessons for sure. Because, of course, hard work is no doubt a part of the equation to achieve success. You do need that. However, with life experience, especially living as a Black woman in America, you learn that there are often many factors that may prove to be barriers or obstacles that one must overcome that is unfortunately beyond our control. So, there's factors like socioeconomic background, level of education, your environment, access to certain resources, systemic racism. All of these things may contribute to an outcome. And that's what we call in healthcare research social determinants of health. All of those things play a role. And so I see this especially in my dissertation study, where, so many Black parents have shared with me about the time and effort that they put into advocating on behalf of their children, just simply to gain access to things such as medical equipment, referrals, early intervention services, which we talked about is something that should really be easily accessible and available to children in need very early on because of its proven benefits to development.
Yeah.
So, so many of them have expressed that despite their advocacy, they often are faced with uncooperative healthcare providers, limited resources, wait lists, insurance challenges, just so many things.
Yeah.
Right.
So, with that being said, after hearing about some of the parents' experiences with the healthcare system and early intervention services, I've really learned that there is a need for just more family-centered, anti-racist care pathways for Black children with developmental differences to help really eliminate the poor quality of care and outcomes that some of these families are receiving. Sometimes it's based on race and ethnicity. Sometimes it's based on socioeconomic status. It's different, as we said, different factors to what's going on. And so with getting a fuller picture of the barriers and the facilitators, I'm just hoping that I can start thinking of possible interventions based on the results of the study, whether that be looking at the screening tools and whether that's, culturally appropriate, different things, really just learning about what these parents are seeing as the problems and what helps and seeing how we can implement that in the healthcare field.
Amazing.
That's great. So if you're listening to this, again, if you're solution oriented, you hear this and it moves you in some way to say, yes, I've experienced this. I sure wish I could have avoided this, or let me share with people what I wish I knew. Or maybe you're not even a person of color and you just don't like the sound of injustice and you want to be a part of a solution, then, go ahead and reach out and or share it with people that may want to be a part of the study. Again, that number is 310-869-5284. And then the email address is on the screen. Just, keep that in mind and take a chance and be part of the solution.
Yeah. I think we can mark today, July 3rd, 2024. Hopefully, this conversation is going to lead to the creation of a whole new advocacy support group. Like, wouldn't it be great to have medical advocates like we have legal advocates to help people go through this process? Wouldn't that be great if we could kind of create boutique industry out of this conversation. It'd be amazing.
That would be amazing. Absolutely.
Most
Definitely
definitely.
needed. Definitely needed.
And yeah, I would just love to hear from any parents out there who would love to have their voice heard, who want to, share their experience and let us know what we can do better. Love to hear from you.
Great.
And thank you both for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherisse. Yeah, this has been
As did we. Thank you.
Amazing for sure. So as we wrap up the show, thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and really it's amazing. Reach outs to us, folks. If you've got comments, you can email us at wearejusttwodads@gmail.com. Go to our website at justtwodadspodcast.com, justtwodadspodcast.com. And again, feel free to contact us in any way if there's a way that we can be of help to you. We want to thank everybody who listened in. Thanks for putting that up there, Shawn. Listening in on podcast outlets and WSTX AM radio. And as you know, in Trinidad, I guess now I'm learning a new way to pronounce that. Just like in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the topic of this discussion around children with disabilities is one of those culturally that that you don't see much of. And so being open and knowing that there's support and there's help out there, be an advocate for your child. And to our folks at Billy Footwear and Sensational You as well, adaptive footwear and adaptive clothing for folks. Reach out to those folks. We're going to put their links on the show notes here as well. If you go to Billy Footwear, they give you 10% discount off your sales. They're huge friends and supporters of ours. If you want to be involved in our men's group called The Den is the comfiest room in the house, or guys who just sort of hang out. It's a free space to talk about these kinds of issues, these kinds of things, those things that hit us in the heart that we may not feel safe to talk about in other places. The Den is a great place, a resource for you to come. So we've put all that stuff up there. There's a form you can fill out. It's free to join. Just join us. We do a Zoom meeting every 2 weeks. And I think, Shawn Hall, thank you, Shawn Hall in Hawaii. Just thank you, everybody. And as we wrap up, let me just say, empathy and love. I always end the show the same way. Empathy and love is so important. Have some empathy for the person that you're encountering or for the situation that you're in. If you don't know the whole story, don't be judgmental. Have some empathy. You don't know what that person's going through. And if you just look at the world and see the world through lenses of love, the world is just a much more beautiful place. So, Cherisse, thank you for your contribution today and for this conversation, and really fascinating. And I'll throw it to Shawn to close us out.
Yes, Cherisse, as we sign off, stick around, if you will, right after we sign off, just for a very brief moment. To each and every person within the sound of my voice, if you can hear me, we love you. Thank you so very much. Remember that questions are so much more powerful than statements. Let's try and be more childlike and less childish. And remember that everybody needs the same thing, basically speaking, needs to be seen, needs to be heard, needs to know that they matter, and needs to know that they're loved at this time more than ever, generally in the world and especially in our country. So, have a great and safe 4th of July. This is before, we're at the time of this recording. This is the 3rd. Go ahead and celebrate your independence. Don't be afraid to ask questions as well. And remember that we love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.